Ooh. Okay. So, Miss Allison, welcome to my guest lecture series. I'm now calling it a series because I have multiples. So, Allison Atkins. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. So welcome. Thank you for coming and speaking at my 3210 fundamentals. So we're just going to go through these questions real quick. I'm really excited to hear about what you're doing at Carter's and how your job has changed post-COVID, or we're not even past COVID. We're like in COVID.
We're in the middle.
We're right smack in the middle. So if you'll just go ahead and introduce yourself, your title, and kind of in the company you work for.
Sure. So my name, like you said, was Allison Atkins, and I work at Carter's.
Your name too.
I was like, what's my name? Looking at you thinking I was going to say your name. So my name's Allison. I work at Carter's in Oshkosh in Atlanta, and I am an assistant merchant. And I have been there for a little over 2.5 years now. So it was my first job, like straight out of college. I had internships in a couple other areas, but this is my first job straight out of school. And I've been there since.
That's awesome. So would you mind, because you are a UGA alum and I had you in one of my courses. So would you just tell us what your major and your minors were?
Sure. So I was actually a broadcast journalism major, and I was also a theater minor, but I also had a fashion merchandising minor. I kind of came to the realization that I had this passion to work in the fashion industry a little late in my college career. So I kind of, I was like, I was only going to be at UGA as long as Hope was with me. And I wasn't about to, have to pay that full tuition. So I was like, I'll do the minor and I'll get in as many internships and experiences that I can so that it can boost myself. So when people see I'm at journalism, they're not just like, oh, well, she doesn't have any experience.
Would you mind, what were your internships that you held to get an assistant merchandising position at such a big corporation?
So most of my internships were at the America's Mart in downtown Atlanta, at the wholesale mart. So I worked in a couple different showrooms. One showroom I went on for an internship, and then they brought me back for a couple market weeks, and I worked just kind of helping with the sales floor and also kind of working on their visual merchandising, and I did all their social media. And then I also had an internship one summer with the corporate office. And so I was teamed up with one of their sales leads, and we helped lead a couple of the market weeks. So I did a lot of that. I also was a team lead at Urban Outfitters, and I did visual merchandising there as well.
So you worked in retail as well. You were working on a floor. That's fantastic. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad, because I always push people to do those Atlanta marts. And I just think they're super cool. And especially with merchandising, when you're on the sales, you're basically just on the, the opposite side of it. So that's good. I'm glad to hear those were valuable, because I totally push those. I'm like, skip school and work.
They're super easy to get to. I feel like I actually found a couple of mine through the fashion merch listserv.
Through Dr. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and just picking up a couple temporary positions, and they were really helpful to me because you kind of get a full scope of things.
Yeah.
From selling, but then having to understand your customers, to showing how you sell your product at a wholesale level. It's very valuable. I highly recommend.
Okay, good. Okay, so then you got an assistant merchandising position, which I feel like most of our students always want to go into merchandising, buying kind of area. So would you mind telling me a little bit about your job, kind of what you do, and then some of really the important skills that you think you use, I guess, in your job?
Of course, yeah. So anytime somebody asks me about merchandising, it's just so hard to explain. So I've tried to practice a lot when I try to tell my parents and my friends, what I do, because it's so broad. It's kind of hard to, explain it in a brief sentence.
Yes.
But basically, we are the drivers of the product, from helping design, figure out what trends we can sell, what we can put in the line, working with our buyers to figure out how many SKUs, how many styles we need to create. We work with product development and sourcing, figuring out the best quality of fabrics to meet our standards, and, being able to afford things and source them in an affordable way. And then we work with kind of projections and forecasting teams, and they're just kind of, forecasting the units of what our different customers will work with. So we kind of help give guidance to them. All the while we're watching selling of what's on the floor and, making analytic and business decisions on what we can do go forward. So basically we help the product from its beginning life, and we watch it until it's on the floor and it's marked down.
Yeah, until it's out of there. Was that good?
I was like,
no, that's perfect. And that's
that.
Well, and I love that you talked about the different kind of cross-functional team members is what we kind of call it, in academia. But, like you're working with design, and you have to work with product development and sourcing, and you have to work with buying and planning and things like that. So wait, may I ask, what product category do you work on?
I work in boys playwear. So we do like all the way infant, all the way up to size 14. So I have probably the hardest job in merchandising because I have the most amount of SKUs and the most amount of ages.
Oh my gosh. Well, and so I definitely buy your product for Henry.
Yeah.
That's all he does is play and boys and Carters. So that's what we live in. So yeah. I definitely have bought your product before, probably just this weekend when I went.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
It is very cute. I like it. So what are kind of your big skills? You kind of talked about analytics, but then you even have been in kind of forecasting and even like, what are some of the things, I guess, that you inform design about? Because I think it'd be interesting just to talk about maybe some of the skills that you use with each one of your cross-functional partners. So, what do you help design with?
Well, we kind of help them, like they go out and they travel and they find the trends and they kind of plan what they see that season becoming and where they want to slot in. We kind of give them the line plan, as we call it, and like kind of the boxes they need to fill in. Like we always have to have a basic short. We always have to have a run of t-shirts because, it's little boys, it's playwear. Yeah. And so we kind of guide them into like the boxes they need to fill in. And so once they've designed and they've inserted their work, we kind of go over it with them, and they might have something a little too trendy for our mom. Like we know our customers a little bit more conservative, Midwestern mom.
Yeah, so, Midwestern.
So sometimes the like super trendy kind of quirky items don't really sell very well. So it's like, we don't want to over penetrate that. So we kind of work with them. Like we don't want to, like our job is very creative. Like we want to come to it in a creative mindset, but we have that analytics to know, like, we had a crazy, pink short last year. It didn't work. We can't do it again, but let's try a purple one, Yes. So we kind of just like creative guide them, and we try to keep them up to date on the selling as well. So anytime, every Monday, we spend like all morning, working and analyzing what happened last week. And so we'll try to have like little hindsight moments and let them know like how certain groups did and certain styles did, so that way when they're designing, they don't come to us and we're like, oh yeah, that didn't sell, that didn't work. They have a mindset too.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what do you work with maybe product development and sourcing about? What kind of relationship do you have with that?
They're probably one of my closest cross-functional partners.
Really? Oh, and I was in PD for a while, so I love this.
Yeah.
I'm so interested always to hear what the other cross-functional teams, team members think about different. So yeah, how do you work with them?
Yeah, so I would say we work with them closely with design as well. So actually we're in the midst of it right now. We're designing our summer 2021, which sounds like a fake year. We're designing that right now.
If we live till then.
I know, I was like, that's not real. But so we're working with them, and they kind of, they help us through costing. Like we have, our cost targets, we have to hit our margins, and we have certain price points. Like we can't just, overprice things. We have a certain level and a price point that we like to hit for certain items, and we know how much our customer is going to pay for something. So we work closely with, so our actual team is product development and in the office, and we have a sourcing team that's in Hong Kong.
Okay, got it.
That actually broke off when I was in the company. But so it's really just product development that we're working with.
Okay.
Directly. And so, yeah, they help us a lot with costing. And so they're communicating with our Hong Kong sourcing partners and working with them to kind of
help you with like timelines and like to kind of fulfill your delivery dates and things like that. Or is that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we try to not have them, tell us everything, but they're always on top of it. They know,
Yeah.
like, we have to have certain stuff in the system at this point. We have to, sign off on this by this point. So they're like, we have a couple different calendars that we work on too. Mostly we work, pretty far in advance for our development process, but we have a couple groups that we work on a reactive process. So we're able to kind of create them a little bit closer to when they'll actually sell. So I have to work really close with my product development partners on that so that we're hitting those deadlines so that we get that product in. And then they help us also with our samples. Samples is a big part of my job. And it's a big part of their job too. So they kind of get it in and they do their, their look over it and check it and make sure, the trends and everything are right. And then I look at it and see if I see anything, big, and we work together and organize it so that way we can reference things, go forward. So a lot of samples for both of us.
So what do you do with your samples? Because I know that's something that when you're an intern, you're helping track samples and things like that. And I think a lot of people don't realize, what are those samples even used for?
Yeah, so I know it's probably different at different companies.
Yeah.
But for my job specifically, we get 3 rounds of samples. So we get our first round of samples is what we get in initially straight from paper to sample, and we review that. And that's when we decide if we can afford things. That's when we'll take things off. That's what I'm in the process of right now, and just making sure everything like looks the way that design intended it to when they put it on the paper. Okay. And so then those go away. And then once we've landed the line and we sold it in to everybody and worked with buyers and everything, we get a second round of samples, and those go to more for like advertising. So they're still earlier before the, the product is actually hitting on the floor, but we send it to our photo studio to get it shot for e-commerce. We send it to like on-figure styling and our like visual labs to set up the store walkthroughs and stuff. And then we have a last round of samples, which is like what they're going to send out in bulk. That's going to be at the stores. And it's just like the final perfect piece. And we get a line of that as well. And I'm in charge of organizing all of them. And we keep about 4 or 5 seasons in the building, and we keep a few in a warehouse, one of our distribution centers, just for history to have, and they later get destroyed. But it's a lot of samples to work with.
Oh, I remember.
I've learned to love it. Some people, they either like it or they don't. I'm somebody, I really like to be organized. I like a good organized closet, especially. So it becomes like, if I have a good few hours to just spend in my sample closet and organize it, I feel so much better about myself.
Oh, totally. Oh, I loved it. I mean, I played in my closet since I was a kid. So that's when I knew this was like where I needed to be.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, you got to go into it knowing that you're going to have samples in your life.
Yes. I mean,
don't get blindsided with that.
Yes, just piles and piles of samples and cuttings of fabric and embroideries. And so then explain to me how buying work, or how you work with buying.
Yeah, so, and I know this is different at companies as well. Sometimes merchandising and buying are together. So I would say buying does a similar job to ours, but they do it more on the back end, and it's a little less creative based. Okay. So they work heavily on.
Would that be kind of like a planner in other companies?
We have planners as well, but it's kind of more on the planning level. So when we present them the line, we're like, this is what we've assorted to. This is what we think you can take in your stores. And it's a little different at Carter's too, because we have retail stores, but we also have a wholesale model.
Oh,
so
right. Okay. I forget.
So yeah, so with that's, I think, is the main reason we're broken.
That's why it's called buying there, because they're the ones going in. Okay. I get that now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're buying just for the stores and for e-com. So we kind of work with them on that, but then they choose. They're the last ones, to choose what's going into the store. Like, we give them our recommendation, but it's their decision.
It is, yeah.
So they assort to how they want to put it in the store, and they work closely with visual and, unpricing models and stuff and signage and stuff. That's a little bit more on their side. Okay. But they're working, I would say they're a little bit more analytical than us, because we're kind of presenting them with it, and then they can do what they want to with it.
And they're more on the like retail side in a way too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's get into COVID. So, how has your job changed because of COVID? I guess, how are you working potentially differently? How is like a big company like Carter's, are there big changes that you're feeling? I know my students and I'm very curious of how this has kind of changed the way we work.
Yeah. Well, I guess the first main one that I noticed is I get to work from home.
Are you 100% at home?
Well, I'm a part of, they're phasing us in a little bit, and now I only go in when I need to go in.
Okay.
So on Monday, I have to do some sample stuff. I'm going to go in for a few hours, but like you have to plan it, and they work with the building on like who's going to be there. They turn on your badge. There's a whole nurse now. You have to get your temperature taken. You have to wear a mask the whole time, social distance. So it's safe to go in, but they don't want a lot of people there right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, up until probably a few weeks ago, I was 100% home.
Wow. Okay.
And I've never been able to work from home just because everything we do is so hands-on, and like I couldn't bring the whole sample closet here.
I know. And you're always grabbing, it's not in a computer. It's not in a file. Like it's, oh wait, no, that one sample, that one red random swatch I have.
Yeah. So that was, I think for the entire, especially merchandising department, was a big shift, because it's just so much easier to be there with all of the partners we work with. It's so easy to just go to somebody's desk, than it is to send them an email or call. Yeah. And that's just something that they in our department have really like brought us up to know, like you should go to someone before you call or email them. So it was a big change to do that. And I think a lot of my team, we didn't really know how to communicate. Like we never used like IM messaging or anything. We never did video calls. Like I literally was like, I don't know how to get on a conference call. I've never used one. Like my boss had to tell me how to do it. Like, so that
it's so collaborative, and you're kind of in each other's space and face, and a lot of how creative things happen. So I'm sure it was a huge shift.
Yeah. And it's hard. And it's harder too, like, especially like working with design when we're trying to lead them a certain way, or like try to tell them that's not really going to work for us. It's harder to do that when you're doing it over email or a video. It's so much easier to kind of, show them with a sample, or, show them our selling boards or something. Yeah. So it's been a bit of a transition, especially like in communication, just because we have to basically over communicate now because we can't just walk to each other. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of shifts, I guess, in the business, because when COVID hit, I think we were like one of the last companies to go completely work from home because they didn't want to call it too early.
Yeah.
Once we were home, I think we realized it wasn't going to just be the 2 weeks. And so, we had all this inventory that was shipping to stores that were going to be closed.
Wow.
And I'm still in the midst of this. We had to basically had all this stuff in the DC, a lot of it. Some were at factories, some were on boats, like in transit.
Oh God.
So we had to basically decide, like, we're going to pack and hold some of these at our distribution centers, and we're going to ship them at a later date. And it sounds a lot easier than it was, because there's so much system work and back work you have to do for the history. And since we're multi-channel, retail could have bought it and wholesale couldn't have, or, we had to do the same. And it's very hard with so many wholesale customers to figure out who actually bought what, and, what did they have at in their distribution centers. And it's been really tricky. And so we've had to, do a lot of system work. We've had to slot in like this old creative that we had this creative, we have to slot it in somewhere, figure out how that trend from last year is going to work this year.
Yeah. Or like, I would just think that because of all the states operating so differently, and so businesses opening at different times, and I would think even to get it out of the DC into retail stores, Georgia was open sooner than Virginia, it's like, okay, well, Georgia can accept it, but Virginia retail stores won't because they're not open yet. So I can only imagine.
And we actually, we realized COVID before it even got to the US, because a lot of our factories are in Asia.
Were they just closing down?
Some were just closing. And we were like, oh, this virus, what's going on? Get to work. So we knew about it like early January, because we were already getting delays and stuff that wasn't shipping.
Wow.
So it's been hard. And now we have, because of, and retail has to look at, the budget a lot closer than my department does. So they're saying like, we have this deficit. We can't just have all this product. We got to cancel some of it. So a lot of that canceled fabric turns into liability fabric.
Yes.
So that's another fun thing. We get to decide how we're going to take this old fabric from last year and figure out how to use it next year.
Yeah. So you're doing a lot of designing into liability fabrics and things.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like a puzzle piece right now. But we're getting there.
Yeah.
really excited for this virus to go away. But
virus just needs to go away.
Go away. Yeah, so it's definitely been different, but I think go forward, we've realized like we don't need so many different versions of a short. We can have one good short and we can just make it live. Like, why waste the time and cause possible liability?
So do you think fashion will slow down? Because, I mean, let's all be honest, even if you're not a fast fashion retailer like Forever 21, we all are. I mean, every retailer is working under a fast fashion model, or at least it was up until COVID. Do you think potentially we'll start seeing a slowing of fashion, or do you think we'll go back to our old ways?
I think it's going to be a company by company process probably, but I think a lot of companies are re-looking at their model and knowing that even after COVID, like if this all settles down, people are still going to be relying on e-commerce. That's already how the trend was. So they're not going to need as much in a brick and mortar store to begin with. And then again, like truly how many CCs do you need on an e-commerce site? People don't have that bit much of an attention span. They're going to see the first 3 panes and then they're going to click to something else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, personally, I do think most companies will slow down a little bit, at least.
I think it'll be
because
good.
I know everyone's been hit in a certain way. They might not be hit the same way I am, but everyone's affected in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're just reevaluating like all this work that we did. Can we really quantify it and make it a little bit more like quality product than just like spitting out to hit a CC number?
Oh yeah. I think companies that did have big CC numbers, like I know the Gap and my friend, because we always were like, oh, well, we got to register every single color in our season palette. So we need all 22 on that front table, and
yeah,
that's just not the way I think we shop anymore. I don't think that's the way we're going to retail anymore. And a great point about e-commerce. People aren't, caring about that. So, okay. So to wrap up, what's I kind of love that, you were kind of late to finding out how much you loved fashion. So I guess now what's your favorite thing like about the industry or about fashion, or why have you decided to stay in fashion when you had all these other kind of interests and obviously talent? So what makes you love fashion?
I think probably my favorite part is just working with product. That sounds cliche and lame, but like it's a product that I'm passionate about, whether it being children's clothes or clothes for women's wear. Like, I think I just really relate to clothing and I really like it. And it makes sense to me. I can understand the trends, and it's, especially my job now, it is so rewarding to be able to like see something on paper and then show my mom in a Kohl's like, oh my God,
yes.
I did that.
Yes. Oh my God. That was honestly my favorite thing when you're just randomly somewhere and you're like, dude, that's my t-shirt. Like I worked on that t-shirt. Like when you see someone.
I scroll on Facebook, I'm seeing your kids. I'm like, oh, that's mine. That's mine.
Yes. I'm like, oh my God. That was always so rewarding because you're like, wait, I really had something to do with that. That seems like, I think that's so cool.
And I think I just, it's like, I really like apparel. I don't think I could do the same thing with something else, I got to be passionate about it. And I've always been passionate about clothes and apparel and just this industry. So I think I thought that it was a passion I had that I didn't need to really like study on. And then once I got to school, I was like, no, I got to get back into this. I really like it.
Oh, that's like a perfect way to end it. I love it. Oh my God. Well, Allison, thank you so much. This is in the middle of your work day, so I really do appreciate you taking the time out recording this with me, giving this insight with my students. This was a really fun conversation. So I just want to say thank you.
Of course. It was a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to help out.
All right. Thanks.